Welcome to today's session on Virginia's American Rescue Plan Act Child Care Stabilization Grant Program, where we will be discussing documenting your expenses and some grant spending strategies. During today's conversation, we will review exactly how can you use your grant funds and what are some of the allowable expenses. How do you develop a spending strategy? And what are some of the ways that these funds can be used to invest in and strengthen your childcare program and business? And also what resources are available in order to help you implement those strategies? And then lastly, how do you document your spending for the grant? Virginia received $488 million from the American Rescue Plan Act, also known as the ARPA, to develop and implement a child care stabilization grant program. Virginia will distribute funding to help child care businesses address the impacts of COVID-19, including the statewide staffing crisis. The funds will allow child care providers to make strategic investments in their programs to strengthen their operations and sustain services for our children and families that are furthest from opportunity. For more details on the ARPA Child Care Stabilization Grant Program, including the payment process and schedule and the application, please visit www.vecf.org/ARPA. During today's session, we will talk through topics that will help you better understand what types of expenses are considered allowable for coverage by the stabilization grants, how to make sure you have proper documentation of these expenses, and ideas for spending strategies that are allowable and provide ways to strengthen your program both in the near and long term. So we will not go into the mechanics of the grant itself or the schedule. This is more so on strategies, but if you are interested in learning more about the mechanics of the actual grant, you'll just visit the website that you see posted here. So at the top of your mind may be, how can I use my grant funds? Generally, grant funds can be used to support maintaining childcare business and program operations. Funds may be used for allowable expenses incurred prior to the grant period. So for example, you can reimburse yourself for those allowable expenses that you've already had prior to receiving the grant. There's also no time frame for spending the grant funds, so you can also spend the funds as you go along. So understanding that the grant can cover past and future expenses, it is best to use the funds in accordance with what is allowable and will help you remain in operation. So while the list of specific expenses may vary depending on what is considered necessary for each individual program's operation, the following business-related costs that we'll go through over the next couple of slides are generally considered allowable for most programs and of valid use under the stabilization grant. This includes payroll, including self-pay and owner's draws for sole proprietorships, staff benefits, including paid leave and supports to access COVID-19 vaccines, appointments, and manage side effects, employment and personnel costs, including bonuses, temporary or permanent increases in compensation, and also hazard pay, rent or mortgage, and for family day home providers, keep in mind that your rent and or mortgage costs may be subject to the time-space calculation because that has both a personal and business element to that. And we'll go into that a bit later. The funds can be used also for utility costs, property taxes, personal protective equipment, cleaning supplies, classroom supplies, indoor and outdoor equipment for your program. Funds can be used for insurance that's related to the business or employee benefits, minor repairs, keeping in mind that construction and major renovations are not considered allowable, staff development or training costs, transportation for your program. So a program bus or van that's used to transport children, food for your program, and food that is not already covered by the food program or reimbursed by the food program, mental health consultation services and supports for children and staff, office supplies, and business software and technology upgrades, such as a child care management system. Family day home providers can use funds towards those previously mentioned expenses. However, some expenses have both a business use and personal use associated with them. So for example, your monthly mortgage or rent for your home. For those expenses, family day home providers are encouraged to use the time-space calculation to determine what percentage of those shared expenses can be considered business expenses. If you already have your time-space percentage calculated from your last year's taxes, you can use that when determining how much you're spending for the stabilization grant. However, if not, there is a helpful worksheet that can help you calculate your time-space calculation available at the vecf.org/ARPA page. So why is a spending strategy important? Having a spending strategy is key to investing your grant funds effectively and properly. While the investment provides an opportunity to sustain and strengthen your business, it also needs to be spent in compliance with the funding requirements. It's best to perform a brief needs assessment for your program by asking yourself certain questions. These questions may be, what past expenses do I have documentation for that also falls into the allowable spending categories for the grant? A great strategy is looking at those expenses that you've already incurred that meet the requirements of the grant. And in that case, you're able to reimburse yourself for making those expenses already. And with the funds that you receive from the grant program, those funds are yours to reinvest into your program however you choose, because you would have already spent the funds on those past expenses. Another question that may come to your mind is staffing is the engine that keeps the program running. So how do I reward my staff so that my business can continue to operate? The key investment area for the use of the funds is staffing, and boosting staff, retaining and recruiting staff it's very integral to the childcare business. So learning of ways that these funds can be used and redirected to maintain your staffing levels so that your program can continue to operate is a great strategy. You may also ask, am I having difficulty maintaining or boosting enrollment at my program? And how can I use these funds to support marketing efforts? Another great investment area is looking at how the funds can be used to help boost and increase enrollment at your program. Do I need to make minor improvements to my home or center? Many programs may have been putting off certain renovations or improvements due to the lack of affordability. However, with the funds from the Stabilization Grant Program, you may be able to address some of those that can help boost the quality and safety of your program. Are there pieces of equipment or technology that would improve my program operations? So again, thinking of how can these funds be used to strengthen and improve current operations, and technology is a big part of that as well. And we'll go into these strategies in a bit more detail. So the first spending strategies area is financial resiliency. Do you need to make up for lost revenue? The financial impact of the pandemic on childcare businesses cannot be understated. Many programs have grappled with closures, decreased enrollment, and inconsistent attendance rates, which contributed to a significant loss in revenue. Many childcare business owners took out loans, dipped into savings, and paused paying themselves in order to manage. However, grant funds can support your recovery from these losses and help to restore your wages. Many businesses took on debt to survive the pandemic. Regardless of the source of the debt, whether it was the SBA's EIDL loan or some other commercial debt, the accumulated debt will make it significantly harder for your business to recover. Typically, your monthly debt payments will consist of a percentage of your remaining loan principal balance, and the higher this balance, the higher the interest you pay each month. So prioritizing paying down this debt is a sound strategy that will help you to continue to serve families and reposition your business's ability to make a profit by reducing your monthly costs. This strategy will help free up revenue to use on other necessary expenses your program needs to operate. In addition to paying down debt, funds can be used to keep up with other routine payments while you get back on your feet. For example, if you are having trouble affording regular expenses such as utilities or home payments, you may be able to use these funds to keep your operations going until things have stabilized for you. Are you prepared for financial emergencies? Certainly, the pandemic has driven up costs of existing expenses. It's created new expenses, and it's contributed to less income for you. This makes budgeting for your new reality a key feature of your plan for continued operations. Not planning or accounting for these new expenses and upcoming emergencies could put your business in jeopardy of permanent closure. Having a monthly budget may be a good place to start for a smaller operation like a home-based childcare. Once you're comfortable with the process of budgeting, a 6-month cash flow may be the next level option for tracking incoming and outgoing funds. Once you have an idea of what your budget will allow, you should consider putting aside funds for a rainy day, also known as an emergency fund. It's recommended that businesses have 3 months worth of expenses available in their emergency fund so that you can continue to meet your routine bills during times of financial challenges. And more resources on doing a simple budget or a 6-month cash flow will be available soon on the VECF.org/ARPA's website. Do you have systems in place to manage your financial and other record-keeping responsibilities? Having a defined way of tracking your revenue and expenses will make it easier to follow through with your decision to follow a budget. Having accurate information to inform your budget will strengthen your ability to bounce back. Many providers can track their finances with a basic bookkeeping system and a business bank account. Initially, this tracking can be as simple as having a method to log weekly revenues from tuition and payments and the expenses that you've had to pay, and store records of those transactions or receipts. Once you have those business basics down, you may consider the use of electronic systems to track these with more ease. Online systems such as FreshBooks, QuickBooks, and Gusto can help with bookkeeping and payroll. These systems give you real-time information on your financial outlook and help you make necessary decisions. These systems will also aid you during tax time so that you're able to complete an accurate tax return. Keeping good records is essential to managing your business in general. In addition to the standard accounting tools that we mentioned, you need to track child and staff data, attendance rates, meals, and more. Be sure to also consider childcare management systems for these needs. Systems such as Brightwheel, WonderSchool, ProCare, or EasyCare can help with billing, attendance, and more. And through the Ready Network, family childcare homes and small centers can access resources including WonderSchool, which includes an easy-to-use website, tools to advertise your program, a mobile app for family engagement, tools to simplify payments, and more. So be sure to visit the Ready Network's webpage for more information on that. Here are some spending strategies regarding staffing. Are you having difficulty maintaining staff, recruiting new staff, or looking for ways to reward your staff? A staple feature of the Child Care Stabilization Grant Program is that the funds can be used to meet the pressing challenges that the staffing crisis has presented. Now more than ever, staffing is an integral component of the childcare business model. Without the necessary staffing in place, other components of the business's ability to operate are at risk. Using grant funds for temporary pay increases and bonuses is a great way to push much needed funding into the childcare labor force and reward your hardworking employees. Finding ways to increase staff retention may require multiple approaches. There could be some quick actions that you can implement to aid in retention, such as offering a bonus or a temporary pay differential. You can pay substitutes to give your staff some additional time off, and other ways to acknowledge and reward your staff. There's also longer-term approaches, such as increasing your pay scale, staff benefits and paid time off, and supporting staff career development. Most of these strategies will have budget implications, so it is advised that you plan for them and your budget to understand what you can afford. And there's a great resource available on structuring and offering these incentives entitled Rewarding Your Staff with Bonuses and Temporary Pay Increases. And that is also available at the VECF.org/ARPA's website. The same strategies can be applied in your pursuit of attracting qualified staff. In a highly competitive employee market, you should consider grant funds to offer a sign-on bonus for new employees and offer employee referrals and incentives to existing staff. The bonus can be structured in a way that aids in retention for your new staff. For example, a new staff member will receive their bonus after 6 months on the job with satisfactory performance. And while compensation is likely the number one factor in someone choosing to enter and stay in a job, benefits are also a critical piece of their decision. There are many reasons why you should offer benefits, and here are a few of them. It aids in improved staff satisfaction, which then increases staff retention. Having benefits makes the employer more competitive in a tight labor market, and it lets staff know that they're valued and that you're supportive of their needs. Providing benefits does not have to be an all or nothing concept. There are different benefits that can be offered with varying price points. Some may be little to no cost, and some may be more significant. Even small increases, however, can make a big difference in a tight labor market. You may be wondering where to start and what your options are. Most importantly, you want to be sure that regardless of what is being offered, that your employees are able to see the value in them, easily understand, and easily access them. And here are some common benefits that a company can offer their employees. Paid time off, health insurance, which is critical for childcare staff and teachers, especially during the time of the pandemic. It's made them more cognizant of the health risks that are associated with their position and exposure, and having health insurance is highly valued by childcare teachers. Retirement, having access to supplemental insurance, including employee assistance programs, which can help with mental health concerns and other life concerns. Tuition assistance and staff development, and also offering childcare benefits to your staff. Do you pay yourself as a sole proprietor or an owner of the childcare? As a staff person of the childcare program, you can and you should pay yourself regularly. While this may be the last thing on your mind when it comes to your list of expenses, it should not be neglected and should be treated as any other payroll obligation. To determine how much you should pay yourself, you could begin by drafting a monthly budget and tracking your actual revenues and expenses to understand how much you usually take in and pay out for the month. This will allow you to see what a reasonable wage may be for yourself. Any payments to owners should be treated as you would any other regular payroll. If you receive pay as a W-2 employee, then you would use the same documentation that you would for any other paid employee. You will need to record payments to yourself, and having a business bank account can help you in this process. This will help you separate personal from business funds and help you track your payments. Would you like to continue education or training for staff? Staff benefits range from pay to benefits that impact career satisfaction. Providing opportunities to invest in your staff and advance their skills will benefit the quality of your program while possibly aiding in the retention of qualified staff. An investment in your staff can pave the way for new art, music, and reading programs, as well as new child learning techniques. These programs can also make your childcare business more appealing to families and help stabilize your enrollment over time. For family day providers, scheduling time for professional development can be a challenge. You could use the additional funds to cover costs or expenses associated with the time off or site closures for you to take professional development days, or pay the additional staff coverage that you may need to attend these trainings. Funds can also be used to cover any staff travel expenses or per diems associated with professional development. Our next investment area would be your program's enrollment. Are you having difficulty maintaining or boosting enrollment at your program? The pandemic has spotlighted the need for childcare businesses to rethink their marketing efforts, tools, and strategies to drive or just to simply maintain child enrollment levels. Typically, marketing efforts would be the first expense cut from an already tight operating budget for most programs. However, now that securing enrollments is more critical than ever, it is wise to consider using this grant funding to conduct marketing activities. This could consist of designing and purchasing promotional materials such as flyers and brochures, starting or upgrading your program's website, upgrading your signage, offering parent incentives to enroll, and purchasing paid ads. There are also some no-cost activities that could be done to support your enrollment, such as actively maintaining your waitlist and reaching out to families as soon as you have an opening. You may also find that a subscription to a shared services program such as Wonder School or the Virginia Shared Services Network could assist in expanding your network and offer marketing support in addition to cost savings opportunities. And did you know that family childcare homes and small centers serving fewer than 50 children can access free resources by sending a quick text? Text WONDER to 33777 to learn about a free subscription to Wonder School, which is an online software that assists with your payables, enrollment, and marketing, and includes an app for communications with families. For more information or to join the more than 100 Virginia providers that are already participating, text WONDER to 33777. Another area for spending strategies would be facility improvements, technology or equipment purchases or upgrades. Do you need to make improvements to your home or center? You may have a list of program quality or health and safety improvements that need to happen for your facility. Investing in your facility can help you meet different business goals and aid in a better overall experience for the children and adults that occupy the facility. In addition to the new health and safety needs that you may need to adapt for, grant funds can help you finally address some of those much needed long-term investments. Some strategies include replacing your heating or cooling system, replacing your roof or gutters, providing new bathroom fixtures and toilets, or even revamping the kitchen for more efficient and sanitary service. However, just remember that stabilization funds may not be used for capital investments. And these are things like new construction or major renovations to your facility. So this means that if you're monitored, the allowable expenses that you submit must not include documentation for major renovations. If you are planning or have recently completed a major renovation, however, you should be sure to find all other allowable expenses that you have or will have and allocate your stabilization funds towards those things. If you've already paid for those allowable expenses, you can reimburse yourself with stabilization funds and then use your reimbursement as you please. So this is called a swap. You're using these restricted funds for allowable expenses so that you can free up your unrestricted funds to do things that may not be allowed, such as undergoing major capital expenses. Do you need to make playground or outdoor area improvements? Another potential use for funds is to upgrade your playground and outdoor space for safety and quality purposes. Through these improvements, you can create an area that will be more developmentally appropriate and enjoyable for the children that you serve. Outdoor play spaces are often a big factor for families when choosing a program, so improved play space can also potentially impact your revenue by attracting new families as well as retaining the ones that you have. And there's a wealth of ways that you could invest and upgrade your playground, but a few of those may be installing play structures and equipment, laying rubber surfacing, repairing pavement, updating fencing, purchasing additional riding toys and outdoor toys to push and pull, upgraded sand and water play areas, plus many more things. Are there other purchases, pieces of equipment, or technology that would improve your program operations? Updating the sign-in, sign-out check-in systems used by families or caregivers, updating security or camera systems for your classrooms and common areas, improving technology equipment available such as iPads, laptops, printers, copiers, electronic filing, bookkeeping, tuition or fee payment systems, or childcare management systems. Purchasing a van or a bus to facilitate transportation to and from the school and other settings. You can also consider adding physical improvements, such as new laundry machines, replacing a refrigerator or an extra freezer, or any other kind of equipment that may make things more efficient and effective for your program. Also, equipment that can aid in the new increased sanitation demands that's been brought on by the pandemic. So having items such as portable sinks, hand sanitizer dispensers, touchless faucets and soap dispensers, upgrading your HVAC, having touch-free waste bins, and other purchases that could be considered when improving program operations and health and safety. Are you prepared to carry out an emergency plan, an emergency disaster plan? While most programs are required to have emergency preparedness plans, have you thought about whether you have the necessary resources, equipment, and materials to effectively carry out your emergency plan? So here's a few ideas to consider when executing your risk management plan. Establishing or contributing to an emergency fund, like we talked about earlier, to cover expenses associated with emergencies, such as your insurance deductibles. Having emergency supplies, including portable kits for evacuations and 72-hour supply kits for sheltering in place. And also a text messaging service or parent communication app, which can be used for emergency notifications. So we've gone through different investment strategies for your funds. Now let's talk about documenting your expenses and gathering your documentation. Grant funds are provided upfront, so you don't have to demonstrate need to submit documentation showing that you've already incurred expenses in order to apply for a child care stabilization grant or receive the payments. However, VDOE will conduct random monitoring to ensure compliance with grant conditions and approved expenses. Whether you think you will be monitored or not, we highly recommend keeping record and compiling documentation of your expenses along the way. This way, you will have your records in one place and will be ready to respond to any request for monitoring of these funds. To keep records of your expenses, you could create a digital file and scan or save them there, or get a large manila envelope ready for your receipts. It's very important that you hold on to them for 5 years, so you will want to have a way to keep the receipts safe until you need them. Programs using a child care management system, such as Wonder School, can use those platforms to easily store and track their receipts and expenses. So you may be wondering, how do I make sure that I have everything I need if I am randomly selected for monitoring? The Child Care Stabilization Grant Program offers financial relief to child care providers across the state to support strategic rebuilding investments and help with expenses incurred because of the pandemic. Gathering information about expenses and documenting grant spending can seem daunting, but breaking down the steps can help make the process more manageable. So we'll go through those steps. Step 1 is you'll figure out your past expenses. First, go month by month through your recent records to review things such as receipts that you've already have, your credit card bills, app-based system payments such as Venmo, Zelle, PayPal, and Square Cash, bank statements and canceled checks, third-party payroll systems such as ADP, Gusto, or Paychex. You'll collect proof of payment for every cost that you want to cover with the grant funds, such as a receipt or an invoice marked paid. Unless the purpose is clear, such as a payment to the local electric company, you will need to show exactly what you purchased. Generally, allowable expenses must be necessary to maintain or resume operations. You'll assemble information about the following common business expenses for each month. So these are things such as rent, mortgage, property taxes, and insurance, utility costs, payroll, employment, and personnel costs, personal protective equipment, PPE, and cleaning supplies, classroom and office supplies, and food. You'll gather your actual expenses in those categories. Please keep in mind that you cannot claim expenses that have already been paid for by past rounds of the Child Care Stabilization Grants from the CARES Act, the Paycheck Protection Program, Employee Retention Tax Credit, Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or any other stimulus and relief funding program. So you want to exclude those expenses if you have. And now we'll talk through documenting shared expenses. And this will be most applicable to family day home providers. In some cases, such as with your telephone or your home, items are used for a mix of personal and business reasons. There are tools and methods available to help determine how much of shared personal and business costs can be reimbursed through the Child Care Stabilization Grants. So let's look at the business use of phone as an example. For phones, either a cell or a home phone, you can determine what percentage of the time has been used for business by adding the number of minutes used for business. This should only be for the business owners or employees part of the bill. For example, Jasmine's phone bill is $250 per month in total. She made 40 calls that totaled 200 minutes, and the 30 calls that were for business totaled 120 minutes. Using the minutes, she could claim business use of 120 minutes divided by 200 gives her 60%. If she multiplies her bill of $250 by the 60% used for business, that means she can report $150 in business costs for the stabilization grant. There's also the business use of home. For family day home providers that regularly use their home for business and are licensed or registered, you can be reimbursed for the cost of your home and other related expenses that you typically claim on your federal tax returns. Home-based family day providers can determine the business use of their home using the time-space calculation. This will enable you to calculate the percentage of your rent, mortgage, property taxes, insurance, and utility costs that can be covered by grant funding. Whether you rent or own your home, there are 2 steps you will need to prepare for reimbursement of these costs. And remember, they're the same ones you would take when you complete your tax return. You will determine the space and time of your home used for childcare. That is, how much of the total space in your home is used for childcare and how much of your time throughout the year is used for childcare. Next, you'll determine the allowable expenses related to providing care in your home. And you will multiply your time-space percentage by the expenses that you have to get the amount that you're able to allocate to the Child Care Stabilization grants. Step 2, you'll find your receipts. Now that you have a clear picture of the relevant expenses that you've incurred, you want to make sure that you have proper documentation for each expense. A receipt or other proof of payment should show that you paid for the expense, what you paid for, unless it's very clear, like a utility company payment, the amount you paid, the date you paid it, and a description of the item purchased or service received. Examples of valid receipts or proof of payments would be an itemized receipt from Target, Walmart, or Costco, a payment confirmation from the electric company or a canceled check for a payment to a utility, or a summary report from your payroll company. And as a tip, we would encourage you to search for larger allowable expenses first to help streamline the process. These larger expenses, things like rent or payroll, will take less time to pull together than finding multiple individual receipts for smaller expenses like classroom supplies. Additional proof of payment documentation examples for different types of pay would include, for sole proprietor pay, items like a payroll report or a pay by check, bank transfer, or an at payment where it documents that this was payroll for a given period in the memo section. For contractors, documented pay to 1099 employees can be included, but do make sure they are classified as contractors appropriately. And employer benefit costs. Reports or paid invoices for company-sponsored programs that's offered to all employees, and employer payroll taxes for unemployment insurance and other programs is also allowable. Step 3, you will manage and maintain your files. Even if you decide to keep a manila folder for your receipts, you may want to consider creating a digital backup of your receipts and proofs of payment by taking pictures or scanning the documents. You are required to keep receipts for 5 years, so this will provide a backup in case something happens to the original hard copies of your receipts. And finally, there are resources available to assist you as you develop your spending strategy and as you think of how you want to document those expenses. Please visit the Child Care Stabilization Grant Program's Child Care Business Resources and Supports page at vcef.org/ARPA. Here you will find resources to help strengthen your business. Some of those resources include easy-to-read written guides, webinars, recorded tutorials, and more. Here, you can download a helpful worksheet entitled Developing Your Spending Strategy that coincides with today's discussion. You can also find cost worksheets to organize your grant fund spending contained within the written guide. There's also a guide on rewarding staff with bonuses and temporary pay increases that walks you step by step of how to implement bonuses and temporary pay increases for your staff. Also, for those providers that may be embarking on a renovation or a repair, there's tips on how to find a good contractor. Here at the Resources and Supports page, you can also register for one-on-one business coaching to further support your strategies to improve your childcare business. And there will be more documents to come. These resources are all available in English and Spanish. Thank you.